Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Now I did not receive the RTX 5060 until release day, but did it matter? No, because I didn't get access to the drivers until they became publicly available on the Nvidia site. All I've seen so far are a few previews that lean heavily on frame gen. To me, the most important aspect of any new gaming graphics card is how it performs at native resolution, so that's what we'll be focusing on today in my initial video. I'll also be comparing it to 2023's 4060 to see what sort of generational gains you can expect when gaming at 1080p. Prices seem to start at £269.99 here in the UK from the retailers that I've looked at, and there are a few variants in stock. I'm using the Asus Prime version today, kindly provided by Asus, who had no input in this video. Like always, they just sent me the card and let me run wild and free. Spec wise, we have 3840 cores and 8 gigs of GDDR7. It's a PCIe 5.0 card with 8 lanes. The 4060 has 8 gigs of GDDR6 and is an 8-lane PCIe 4.0 card. I'll put the 5060 gameplay up on screen, as well as the performance metrics, average frame rates, and frame times from both graphics cards. Let's start then with GTA 5 Enhanced Edition. 1080p with the maximum RT preset and DLAA. So the 5060 hit 97 frames per second overall with a 1% low of 80 and a 0.1% low of 77. When we compare this to the 4060, it's an uplift of over 20 frames per second. The 4060 hit 72 FPS with a 1% low of 59 and a 0.1% low of 56. It is a good start for the 5060, and it's clear that there is an improvement straight out of the gate, so to speak. But let's move on to Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 and see if it can maintain its lead. So here, 1080p with the Ultra preset and SMAA 2TX, the 5060 hit 81 frames per second overall, a 1% low of 66 and a 0.1% low of 63. So compared to the 4060, and this is a 15-16 FPS uplift, the 4060 managed 65 frames per second, a 1% low of 55 and a 0.1% low of 52. Again, a consistent result for the older 4060, but the 5060 pulls ahead by quite some margin. That said, when you've got an overlay enabled like I have, you can't help but glance at it every few minutes and think, getting awfully close to that maximum available VRAM now, and it gives you a sort of VRAM anxiety in a way. You do start to wonder, I wonder what games are going to be completely overwhelming to this GPU, even without cranking the settings right up. And it does start to make you wonder in terms of longevity as well, how long a card like this is going to be suitable even at 1080p. I would like to start seeing 12 gigs, 16 gigs as a minimum on new cards. You know, when you've got a 5060 like this, I saw in a Hardware Unbox review that it was matching pretty much in the overall, the 1080p sort of overall results, like it was matching like a 3070 from a few years ago. It's like we've been here before, you know, deja vu. And you can probably get a used 3070 for less than this on eBay UK. Moving on, I'm not particularly enthralled by this timeline. The Witcher 3, 1080p, RT preset, TAAU, 5060, 65 frames per second, a 1% low of 52 and a 0.1% low of 45. I apologise if it sounds like I'm just falling apart. 49 frames per second for the 4060, a 1% low of 40 and a 0.1% low of 37. Again, the 5060 makes some decent improvements over the 4060 at native 1080p with ray tracing enabled here. We're going to move on to Oblivion Remastered because this can be an absolute disaster on certain hardware. A 1080p with a high preset and DLAA here. The 5060 hits 71 frames per second, which was better than I was anticipating. The percentile lows did leave something to be desired. 53 was that 1% low. The 0.1% low was 35. The 4060... similar 0.1% low, 32 compared to 35, but of course the 1% low and the average was noticeably lower with the 4060 as opposed to the 5060, but the margin here, or the difference, wasn't as significant as it has been in some other games. Doom the Dark Ages next. This is one I saw mentioned in a few previews, albeit with frame generation on and getting like over 200 frames per second, apparently, or the appearance of over 200 frames per second, you know. But here at native resolution, ultra Nightmare preset DLAA. 64 frames per second is what you can expect from this card. The 1% low is 55 and the 0.1% low is 50. So it's a pretty consistent experience, don't get me wrong, but you will see some dips and drops below 60 frames per second. It seems as though this preset wasn't enough to completely derail the 5060's 8 gigs of VRAM. There were no major flaws or hiccups with the performance here, which was nice to see. Now in comparison to the 4060, we saw an improvement of about 11-12 FPS overall on average. Again, the percentile lows were also a bit worse with the older card. Cyberpunk 2077 up next with the Ultra preset DLAA on the 5060. We saw 73 FPS, so it's a pretty decent result considering we're using native res, and Ultra here didn't enable ray tracing for this one, but that's something we will look at another time. 59 FPS was that 1% low and the 0.1% low was 55, so again pretty consistent overall. The 4060 managed 50 frames per second, 1% low of 42 and a 0.1% low of 40, so again quite a consistent result, but it is nice to see the 5060 pulling ahead of the 4060 in this one and actually making the difference between unplayable and playable for a lot of people. You know, we're breaking the 60 FPS barrier with one card and not the other. If you want to enable ray tracing though, then you're going to have to think about enabling a DLSS and perhaps a pretty aggressive form of it in order to maintain at least 60 plus frames per second, but more to come in another test. We'll finalise today's results then with Red Dead Redemption 2 at the Ultra settings with TAA. I've turned the sharpness up quite a bit as well because it can look a bit blurry, but the 5060 managed 80 frames per second with this title. The 1% low was 65 and the 0.1% low was 60. Compare that to the 4060, which managed 66 FPS, a 1% low of 55 and a 0.1% low of 50. So from what I'm seeing from my initial tests, yeah, there is definitely an improvement with the 5060 compared to the 4060. So this 8GB GDDR7 card is certainly going to outperform the 8GB GDDR6 card from 2023 in most scenarios, I imagine, unless you find yourself in a game that you're totally VRAM limited in, let's say Indiana Jones for example, which crashed both times I tried to test it on each card, and so 0 FPS for both cards is what I would consider an equal playing field. But there we are, the 5060 compared to the 4060. I hope this gives you a good idea of what to expect. I'm sure we'll see the 5060 take a top 10 spot in the Steam hardware survey in a matter of months, because I think this is going to sell well, and I think you're going to see it in a lot of pre-built systems as well. It's not a terrible card. I would have liked to see more VRAM. 12 gigs at this price point would have been cool to see. Bit of a missed opportunity, I think. It's just not particularly exciting. I don't know. I'm going to go for a walk, take the dog out. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching. Leave a like. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and you want to, of course. I encourage you to leave your thoughts down below in the comments, because I do love to read them. And again, thank you, and hopefully I'll see you all in the next one.